All right. Well, Stephen, we had something we wanted to take a little bit of a closer look at because there's a bigger movement going on that is getting the federal government involved in some hot technology. President Joe Biden has signed a comprehensive executive order addressing the safety and governance of artificial intelligence in the United States. The order, running nearly 20,000 words, signifies a significant shift toward enhanced AI governance, covering areas like transparency, safety data sharing, federal standards, tests, ethical considerations across a variety of sectors. It requires tech companies developing large AI models to share safety data with the US government before releasing them to the public, which addresses transparency concerns advocated by major AI experts. This comes just before the US, China, European Union, and other major tech companies attend an international summit on AI risks at Bletchley Park, organized by the UK government. Are we finally going to do something about leashing AI?
Well, yeah, I think that there's multiple parts here. First off, remember that the European Union proposed an AI law actually a couple of years ago. Funny enough, before the boom of generative AI, and so they had to go back and revise that a little bit to reflect the whole Gen AI universe. Then we've heard a lot of hand wringing and teeth gnashing from politicians. But it's funny. I think it was really the emergence of some deep fakes and some of the president and so on, and some fake images related to the Hamas and Israel war that have really spurred the politicians into action here. And spurred them into action, it did. Like you said, I mean, we in a couple of weeks here, we've got a massive 20,000 word executive order related to AI in the United States, as well as this global meeting organized by the UK. So I'm going to start with Biden's executive order, and then maybe we can kind of dive into some of the other aspects of this story. So what is the executive order really? Well, essentially, it is both a red light and a green light for AI. That's my take on it. So on the red light side, the Biden administration has ordered that businesses share information about their safety test results with their AI systems, that they develop tools to help ensure that these systems are safe and secure, that they consider the impact of AI on the development of nasty stuff like biological materials and nuclear and terrorist stuff, that they protect America from fraud and deception due to AI, because of course there's been a lot of stories about AI generated voices and hey mom, I'm in jail, you got to bail me out, being generated from your TikTok postings and things like that. Also, it would establish a cybersecurity program to develop AI tools to fix holes caused by AI in the nation's critical infrastructure, and basically direct further action. Now, the problem is overall, though, that none of this has actual teeth. It's all based on buy-in from the industry, and frankly, industry, despite what we've seen, with OpenAI going out there and meeting with basically every politician that they can get their hands on, they want there to be restrictions, but they want those restrictions to be beneficial, not counter to their desires. And so, I think that they would love there to be restrictions on the development of competing AI systems. I think it would be great for them if it cemented their dominance in the field. But I don't think they're too excited about having to share the sources of their information and having to protect privacy and having to ask the government before they can roll out new AI tools. No. We don't like that part. We like the part that keeps us in charge. And frankly, a lot of this stuff, there's no answer to it either. So things mentioned in the Biden executive order include equity and civil rights and guidance that AI systems can't discriminate based on age or gender or race. These are absolutely things I think that most people would be inspired by, but also I think most people would be kind of scratching their heads about how do we actually do this? Because essentially, how do we ensure that systems aren't discriminating based on age? Now, as I said, it's a red light and a green light, because on the green light side, they're also trying to bring in new AI workers and AI industries and innovation and competition, all that. So they're going to start bringing in, creating new visas to get people to move to the United States to work on AI systems. They're going to try to have a new AI and research resource, and they're going to try to promote ecosystems and so on, because it's not about slamming on the brakes of AI. Just like OpenAI would like new regulations that support their business and hinder their competition, the Biden administration would love restrictions that block global, use of AI for, things they don't like, but also bring more research here to the United States. And that's the other angle on this story.
So I look at what we're trying to do here, and I say we as the U.S. And it jumps out at me because there's a couple of reasons why I almost feel like we're at a point where this has to be done, because we're letting the technology outpace our ability to control it, for lack of a better term. And this is not the first time this happened in human history. I mean, honestly, if you want to think about humans, we're really good at developing things and then letting them race as fast as possible and then going, oh, wait, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And anybody who's over the age of, I don't know, about 60 or 70 knows that from what happened with the nuclear arms race. I mean, look up some of the crazy projects that we wanted to create a harbor in Alaska by detonating nuclear weapons. Why? Because we could. We had them and they worked. And now 50, 60, 70 years later, we're like, that was a terrible idea. And I'm very glad we didn't do it, because that's just dumb. You run into these kinds of situations where people just want to let the technology do what it does. But the difference between a tool like a weapon and software algorithms like what we're dealing with here in AI is that they can iterate much faster than we could have ever hoped for in the past. And one of the things that we're running into, kind of like you said, is we're having to put some of the things that we believe should be standard protections in place. Don't discriminate based on people's gender, skin color, orientation, age, all of that stuff. And you're like, well, that's just dumb. Why would that have to happen? Because AI algorithms are not programmed by divine intervention. They're programmed by people, and people are flawed, and people have biases, whether they realize them or not. Ask anyone who's worked in AI, and they'll tell you some of the dumb things that AI systems have done because you've forgotten to program certain parameters into them. One of my favorite ones is the fact that there was a problem with an AI algorithm where it determined that if there was a picture of a ruler in a picture, you had cancer, because it inferred that when they put a ruler in a picture to measure the size of a mole or a spot, obviously they want to track its growth over time. Well, the system said, well, wait, there's a ruler in this picture, therefore they must have cancer, because every other picture that we've seen with a ruler, that person's had cancer. Like, that's a bias that can be introduced without even realizing it accidentally. What happens when it's a malicious bias that we introduce into the algorithm? Now it propagates over generations of the system. And I think what happened is that maybe not tech people had hoped that the system would just kind of fix itself over time. Like, eventually how people kind of grow up to not be jerks. Well, the problem is that as people, we have societal pressures to not do that. Sure, some of us do grow up to be jerks, but most of us kind of eventually kind of hit this happy medium where we follow norms and mores in society. We don't have that in AI because there is no norm for AI. So if it wants to, if you feed it a voice and tell it to sound like this other voice, it doesn't know that, you shouldn't impersonate the president. Or if you morph all these other things, it doesn't know any better. And so if we don't put these controls in place now, we will not be able to control it later. Once the runaway starts, once we head down that slippery slope at like bobsled speeds, we're not going to be able to put the brakes on without wrecking the whole thing. So I applaud the Biden administration for saying now is the time, maybe a little later than they probably should have, but this is the government. They take their time. But Stephen, do you honestly believe that controlling AI at this rate will stifle innovation and cause people to go, well, if you won't let us make it do what we want it to do, we're just going to give up?
Yeah, that's the problem here. And as I said, the problem with the Biden administration's executive order is that it's an executive order, not a law. It's also an executive order that only applies to the United States. Somebody can do this in another country, and most of these large AI companies are international at this point. And that's actually something interesting about the Bletchley Summit that I want to point out. Kamala Harris is giving a speech, actually probably about the time you're listening to this, about basically supporting what I just said about the Biden administration's goal, which is basically let's be careful about this stuff, but let's also encourage this stuff in ways that we want it to be. The Biden administration is also announcing that they have gotten 30 countries to sign on to a declaration about the use of AI by the military. But if you look at the list of countries, surprise, surprise, it's basically the U.S. and its allies, and the rest of the world is like, yeah, whatever. This is the problem. Now, when the UK government proposed this AI summit at Bletchley, there was some hand wringing over there about the fact that China was invited. They're saying, "Oh, China, they're the bad guys in this story. Like we shouldn't have them involved." No way. We should absolutely have China involved. If China isn't part of this discussion, then they're going to just do whatever they want to do. Honestly, we need to have the entire world involved in this discussion because, as you're saying, it doesn't matter if the United States or if this little corner wants to keep this genie in the bottle. The genie is going to get out unless the whole world is on board. And there's no way the whole world is going to get on board with the United States deciding what is and isn't an ethical use of AI. That just ain't going to happen. Now, it might happen here in the U.S., but it's not going to work globally. It's not going to work if we don't allow China to be part of the discussion, let alone some of the other countries that the U.S. really doesn't want at the table. Frankly, if we're going to have a solution to AI, if we're going to figure out how to deal with this politically, it has to be a really, truly global initiative. Now, that being said, anyone who's looked at the United Nations knows that global initiatives are really hard. Getting the UN Security Council to vote on anything, even things that seem very clear to you, well, that's a big challenge. And so I think that it is worthwhile for Biden to issue an executive order or for Sunak or for the European Union to enact a law. But I think that we also have to be realistic about what these things can accomplish. So, I mean, overall, I think that we need to be doing this. We need to be having this conversation. I am thrilled that the government finally clued in and wants to have policy discussions about AI and about the harmful effects of AI. But I am going to be watching it because you know how it goes with governments. As soon as they get involved, they're going to make stupid pronouncements and bogus decisions and impractical choices about this stuff. And it's just not going to work. So, we'll see what happens. I'm glad we're having the conversation.